Yeah, I figure, why should we introduce the episode? It's...
So, murderers.
So today we're going to be talking about female murderers. A lot of the time, males get the rap for being murderers, although they are most of the time. When there's a murder, it's a guy. But there are loads of female murderers, it turns out.
Yeah, and you know what? When I was doing my research for this, I found that a lot of the ones I was finding, I'm having a hard time talking.
Miranda's back, by the way. She's back from vacation, that's why she's just like,
yeah, I'm struggling.
Still in vacation mode.
What episode are we on?
15.
15? And
it's episode 15.
And we still struggle with this every time.
The beginning's the hardest part. So it's the end.
Yeah.
Everything in between is a piece of cake.
Oh, yeah. Once we get the conversation started, it isn't a problem. It's just getting there.
It really is.
Oh, what I was saying, though, before I totally screwed up my sentence, what I found is that a lot of the female murderers were killing children. Mm-hmm. Did either of you find that?
Like mothers killing their children?
Yes. Were any of you, show of voice hands, whose murders actually killed the child?
I didn't pick one that was ever framed for killing children.
Mine
I didn't want to do that. Okay.
But she killed a lot of them.
Oh, okay.
Did yours?
No, mine was one that actually I was already super familiar with, and like literally right like the next day after last time we recorded, when you and I were talking, and I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like I woke up the next day, I was like, duh, Rachel, pick this one. So mine were not child killers, but they are teenage girls.
I don't know. You said yours was pretty strange, which I like, because
it's weird.
It's not like one of those, I don't want to say like boring.
Yeah.
It's not like one of those boring one-off murders where she was jealous.
Yeah.
You know.
This one just like, I'll get into it because it's strange. So I'm gonna butcher her name and a lot of these names because this is actually a woman from Italy. Her name is Leonarda Cianciulli? I don't know.
Oh dear, that's a lot of I's and U's.
Yeah.
Cianciulli?
We're just gonna go with that.
Yeah,
we'll just call her Leonarda the whole time. Also known as the soap maker of Correggio.
Oh, she's the title. Those are the best ones.
Yeah. It's kind of funny though. So just like a little overview. So she had 3 victims, and it all happened between 1939 to 1940, and all of her victims were female. She used an axe, and you know what, I'm going to wait to tell you what happened after that. So just a little background for her. She was born on November 14th, 1893 in Italy, and she had a really troubled youth. She attempted suicide multiple times as a child, and she eventually got married, but her mother didn't approve because they already had a marriage set up for her. So she believed, she's a very superstitious woman, she believed that her mother cursed her at that time for marrying somebody else. So her and her new husband, they move, and their home is destroyed in an earthquake, so then they have to move again. And this is when they move to Correggio. She opens a small shop. Everybody in town loves her. All of her neighbors love her. They think she's this sweet woman that you can go to and talk to and all that kind of stuff. Oh my goodness, this is just sad when I read this. So she had 17 pregnancies. Oh my God. 3 were miscarriages, and 10 of them died in their youth. So only 4 of her children actually survived. And she was extremely protective of her children. Not only because a lot of them obviously were dying, but because a long time ago, a fortune teller told her that she would marry and have children, but all of her children would die. So that's another reason that she was so protective of her children. But later on, she also visits a gypsy who tells her that she sees prison in her right hand and a criminal asylum in her left hand. So, like I said, really superstitious. She took this stuff very seriously. There is some speculation, like, some people were saying that they believe she might be psychic, that she thought she was psychic, and different stuff like that. But people did go to her a lot of the times to talk to her, or nobody was really sure what they were doing, but
that she was super, intuitive about people's lives, basically.
Yeah, and people would go to her a lot for help and everything. So, basically, her favorite son, Giuseppe, I think that's such a fun name. It's spelled so weird, too.
I have a great uncle named Giuseppe.
That's awesome.
My grandma's from Italy.
So. Oh, that's cool. So, Giuseppe is drafted into the army in preparation for World War II. And because she is so superstitious and protective of her children, she wants to protect him. And so apparently her way of protecting her children is immediately she jumps to human sacrifice. So,
Well, who wouldn't?
it's got to be the first thing on your mind. So, yeah, she decides that human sacrifice is the way to go to keep her son safe. All of her victims were neighbors. They were all older women who lived alone. They weren't married. And they were all friends of hers that were seeking advice and coming to her for advice. So her first victim was Faustina Seti. She came for help because she wanted to find a husband. I think she was in her 30s. So Leonarda tells her that she found a good husband for her in this city and tells her, first of all, she needs to send out letters and postcards to her family and her friends and everything to let them know how she's doing okay, and that she's going on this trip and everything. Well, when Faustina comes to visit Fernanda before she leaves, I keep thinking I'm getting her name wrong. I did. Leonarda. I keep wanting to call her Fernanda. I don't know why.
She just seems
Every
like
time,
Fernanda,
yeah,
too.
every time I was researching her, I was like searching Fernanda, and I was like, that's not right. Why am I Leonarda? I'll get it right. I promise.
What are you? I missed somebody. I was like, wait.
Yeah. No, I'm just making people up now. No, okay, so she visited. I'm screwing
think
this
you
all
are
up.
pulling my leg, Miranda. This didn't happen. You just wrote it. You just made
Oh,
this
totally.
up.
Yeah, it's all fake.
Good story.
It's so weird, it kind of feels like it is made up. So she visits Leonarda right before she's going to leave to meet this new husband, and that is when Leonarda drugs her with drugged wine. And then she proceeds to kill her with an axe, and then she cuts her body into 9 pieces. And then this is when it gets really weird. So she wrote a memoir while she was in prison, and I'm just going to read what she wrote in her memoir. The memoir is called An Embittered Soul's Confessions. I don't think you can find it anywhere, because I tried to find it. I couldn't find it anywhere.
I was literally
But-
just picking up my phone to
Yeah.
put that on my book list.
Yeah. Because I was gonna link it and everything if people wanted to buy it, and I wanted to read it too. But okay, so this is what she said in her memoir about this woman. I threw the pieces into a pot, added 7 kilos of caustic soda, which I had bought to make soap, and stirred the whole mixture until the pieces dissolved in a thick, dark mush that I poured into several buckets and emptied into a nearby septic tank. As for the blood in the basin, I waited until it had coagulated. Dried it in the oven, ground it and mixed it with flour, sugar, chocolate, milk, and eggs, as well as a bit of margarine, kneading all the ingredients together. I made lots of crunchy tea cakes and served them to the ladies who came to visit, though Giuseppe and I also ate them.
Have
She-
a little priest.
Yeah, she is called the soap maker because she turns her victims into soap and then uses the blood to make tea cakes
Great.
that people eat.
God.
Yes, it's so weird.
Okay, Mrs. Lovett.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, and it even she even says at the end that her and her son ate them.
Okay, that's even more
so
fucked up.
fucked up. Like, why? Why would she even do that?
Like, every story I have heard or read of people doing that, they don't eat it themselves.
Yeah.
They just give
Yeah.
it to
Right. No, they ate it like it was nothing. Oh, and also some people are saying that she received this woman's life savings as payment, which was 30,000 lyre.
Lira?
Lira. Sure.
I think that used to be Italian money.
Okay.
Now
Well, that's
it's
what I figured, but I've never heard it before, so I knew I was going to pronounce it
Yeah,
wrong.
It's Lira or Lire.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
I've only heard Lyra, but we're Americans, so who knows?
Okay. So, the second victim was Francesca Sobi, and this happened September 5th, 1940. They don't have a date for the first one. I don't know why. I couldn't find it anywhere, but for Francesca, she was killed on September 5th, 1940. And for her, she was looking for a job. She was an opera singer. And Leonarda said that she had found her a job, and it's the exact same story. She invites, tells her to send out the postcards, and she comes over to visit, and she kills her, turns her into soap and tea cakes and all of that. Then she received 3,000 lira for her payment. And then the last one was Virginia Cassiopo, and this was her final murder, and it happened September 30th, 1940. So this was another one where it was finding a job. And it's the same story. But she has another quote in the memoir about Virginia. And in it she says, "She ended up in the pot like the other two. Her flesh was fat and white. When it had melted, I added a bottle of cologne. And after a long time on the boil, I was able to make some acceptable creamy soap. I gave bars to neighbors and acquaintances. The cakes, too, were better. That woman was really sweet."
Oh my god, that's like literally Sweeney Todd. Talking about how all the different flavors, depending on what kind of person they put in the pie.
And seriously, only an Italian person would say that. Like, only would food be involved at any cost. That's ridiculous.
It's crazy. And from this woman, she received 50,000 lira and assorted jewels for her payment. So she was making a good amount of money through all of this, too. So those were her 3 victims, and it was actually, the whole reason she was caught was because Virginia's sister-in-law she noticed that she was missing. She didn't know where she was at, and she remembered that she went over to Leonardo's home that last she knew. And so the police kind of track her down, and she is completely forthcoming. She confesses right away. And during the trial, totally unrepentant, she actually corrects the judge sometimes on some of the details. So the detectives at first didn't believe that she could do it herself, so they detained her son, believing that he was an accomplice, and she held true the whole time, saying that it wasn't him. She was tried in 1946, and she was found guilty. She was sentenced 30 years in prison and 3 years in a criminal asylum. And then she died on October 15th, 1970, in the asylum, and she died of cerebral apoplexy.
Why did she confess? She could have totally gotten away with that.
She didn't think she did anything wrong. She was doing it to help her son, so I mean, I think as far as she was concerned, she had every right to do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But something interesting that I found, now I only found this on one site, so I don't know if it's 100% true. So I found a newspaper article from Australia, and in it, they say that she actually, when they were trying to say that she couldn't have done it, that she wasn't, strong enough, she took the cops and the detectives to the morgue and dissected a body into 9 parts. Because they found that she had done it before, to these women. To one of them, it was done in an hour and 40 minutes. And they didn't think that she could possibly do it, so she just went to a morgue with them, and she did it right in front of them. To prove that her son wasn't guilty and that she did it all herself.
And also, that sounds like somebody who's really proud of
Yeah.
what they did.
Oh, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
look, I can do
Well,
that.
there was
You want to see?
There was an article on the Penn State website, and I'm thinking that it was a student doing homework or something, because there were some comments on it. They were saying that she had a God complex, and that's something I totally agree with, because she just totally unrepentant. She didn't, the only thing she was concerned with was saying, no, I did this, my son had nothing to do with it. And the funny thing is that her son didn't even believe that she did it until he read her memoir while she was in prison.
A lot of those people have a God complex, so they're extremely narcissistic, and no one around them suspects it.
Yeah. Well, and like I said in the beginning, everybody loved her. Everybody thought she was great.
She was probably super charming, and she just had everyone wrapped around her finger.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, that's everything I could find on her. The newspaper article that I found was called Truth, and it was called the article was called The Soap Making Murderess, and it came out on September 7th, 1952. We'll put a link to it, because I saved the link, so we can put a link to it if anybody wants to read it. So there's that newspaper article. Many of her artifacts, I know the pot that she used, is on display at the Criminological Museum in Rome.
Oh my god, that just gave me chills for some reason.
I went to the website, I couldn't read anything, I just searched her name, and I think they might have some of the axe that she used and everything. I think they have that stuff there too. I think that would be kind of cool to go there. I didn't even know Rome had a criminological museum. But
I didn't either, but if I ever get to go to Rome, that's going to be one of my stops.
Yeah, it'd be really cool. And then there was a 1977 film that came out called Gran Bolito, but the U.S. title was Black Journal, and that's about her as well. That's why I said, she seems like she's kind of popular, but I'd never heard of her before.
That is gross and fucked up.
Yeah.
And I've never heard of that one.
Yeah.
Ever. That was a really
weird.
good one.
It's weird.
No, me either.
I was having a lot of fun.
Soap out of somebody. Did she sell the soap?
I don't think so. I think she was just giving it to people. She was just giving it to friends and stuff.
That was nice of her.
It's just the way that it's described, it's so weird because it's like when she writes about it, it's just like nothing. She's just like, yeah, I put her in a pot and I put this in and this in and I made soap and and I made tea cakes, and it's like, that's not normal. Why are you talking about it like it's normal?
It's like Italian Fight Club.
Oh my gosh.
I don't even know.
Oh my gosh.
Oh god, I'm speechless.
Crazy. I told you it was weird.
Okay, I have to try to top that now. Although, that's kind of messed up to say, I guess. Does anyone else have anything to say about, what is it, Leonardo?
Cianciulli. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how they pronounce names in Italy.
Just to be, like you said, just to sit there and, like, list the ingredients in her memoir. Like, anyway, this is how you make an effective soap out of a dead body. Like, who does that? To not even, I mean, it sounds like she never realized what she did was wrong.
No, not at all. I mean, she wrote that memoir, but again, like, she just doesn't sound repentant in her memoir either, from what I saw. So it's like,
yuck.
I think I read as well that there was like speculation on whether she had psychological problems or not.
I'm sure
Some people thought she did, and others were like, no, there's nothing going on. She's just.
I feel like anyone who has the wherewithal or lack thereof to chop up 3 bodies and make soap and tea cakes out of them and eat them and pass them out has something going on. Like, can you imagine a person with a conscience doing that? I don't think a person with a conscience could do that at all.
No.
Not even once, let alone 3 times.
No.
And the whole human sacrifice thing gives me kind of the notion that she was having these, like, delusions of grandeur or something.
I hate saying that she had a lot of weird beliefs because I'm a superstitious person.
Yeah, but you wouldn't...
But I would never believe that my mom cursed me. Even if she didn't have a good relationship with her mom after all of that, I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, my mom put a curse on me.
Even if you did, it would probably be a low-key thing in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
Like, for your life, like, oh, maybe this,
maybe my mom secretly cursed me.
Some people have weird thoughts, but I don't think, like, any person would go to the length, so.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I now have to make a human sacrifice.
That's so weird. It kind of reminds me of... So, Nikki, I know you don't watch Game of Thrones, but Miranda, I know you do.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of, like, the first thing I thought it was the prophecy that Cersei gets.
Oh, yeah.
And all of her children will die before her.
Uh-huh.
And she goes to all these extreme lengths to make sure that they don't die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I didn't even think of that.
But how, like, this lady has this prophecy that, she had prison on one palm and an asylum on the other palm, and then she ends up making it come true. I mean, it's self-fulfilling.
It's crazy.
That's a little bit like an Oedipus sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Without the incest.
Yeah.
Oh.
Told you it was weird.
Well, mine is kind of funny in a weird way.
Okay.
It's Nanny Doss. No? Okay, neither had I.
This is going to be a fun episode for all of us.
Yeah.
I feel like we're all going to learn something today.
Yeah, we're certainly going to learn something. I'm not sure what it is. So I used 3 sources. A book called Mistresses of Mayhem, which talks about a bunch of female criminals by Francine Hornberger, and Wikipedia and Murderpedia.
Oh, and I use Murderpedia too. Forgot to mention that.
Murderpedia is awesome.
Yeah.
Because it just has, like, everything on there.
It does.
So Nanny Doss was referred to as the Giggling Nanny, Lonely Hearts Killer, the Black Widow, Lady Bluebeard, and was called Self-Made Widow by a newspaper. After all of her marriages, by the time she was imprisoned, her full name was Nancy Hazel Braggs Harrelson Lanning Morton Doss.
God, it's like Daenerys.
I was about to say, that's like Elizabeth Taylor with all of her marriages.
She was born in 1905 to Lisa and James Hazel and was the oldest of 5 children. So they were basically poor farmers from Alabama. And, of course, her father was abusive and her mother looked the other way and basically did whatever he wanted. And the children were not born out of any sort of marital love. They were basically born to help on the farm.
Oh.
And they were treated like slaves by the father. and they hardly ever had any time to themselves. But now I'm leaving kind of what many people would consider a crucial part of this story out of the story. I'm going to add it at the end to see if it changes your perspective, but here's a kind of a hint of it. The farmer's daughter always found time for a roll in the hay in her daddy's barn. That was a sentence from the Mistresses of Mayhem book.
Okay.
So when she was around 7 years old, the family was taking a train to visit relatives in southern Alabama when, of course, as you're going to find with many serial killers, she sustained a head injury because the train stopped suddenly and she hit her head on the metal bar on the seat in front of her. So after that, for years, she had blackouts, headaches, and depression. She even went so far as to blame that head injury on the reason she did all the things she did. It kind of is reminiscent of John Wayne Gacy, who got hit in the head with a swing when he was little and had blackouts and seizures for quite a while after that. So she is married off to Charlie Braggs when she's 16, and this is in 1921, because you're going to need a bit of a timeline. This goes on for a while. Both of them had affairs. She didn't love him, but they had 4 daughters together. In 1927, Charlie found their 2 middle daughters dead on the kitchen floor of, quote-unquote, food poisoning. So Charlie suspects that something is off, and he takes his eldest daughter and lights the fuck out of there. The book said he was the only husband of Nanny's to come out of his marriage to her alive. Charlie came back to end the marriage after a while, at which point Nanny took her 2 daughters and went to live with her own mother. Now, why in the world this man let her take those daughters away after he suspected that she had killed them is beyond me.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't know if it's because basically the wife or the woman would get the kind of say of custody automatically back then.
I don't think so. No,
it was actually the opposite.
Yeah.
It was?
Most of the time, men would get custody.
Really?
Like they owned everything.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, I have no idea why
she was able
to do that. She may have. She was a very crafty person, and she got away with it because, she was this round-faced grandma. Well, not until the end, but, she was a woman, and she was, supposed to be this housewife and everything. So, then in 1929, so this is only, I think, 2 years? Yeah, 2 years after she married and divorced. No, I'm sorry. This was 8 years after she married and divorced the first husband. She went to work at a cotton mill, and she answered a few personal ads to look for someone to marry, and she met Frank Harrelson through those personal ads. He sent her romantic poetry, and she sent him a cake. He turned out to be a heavy drinker, woman beater, and an ex-con. They were in the marriage for 16 years after that. This is the one I almost don't blame her for, sad to say.
God, that's a long time to date somebody like that.
Her daughters got married and had children. It seemed that any child born to either of Nanny's daughters mysteriously died in Grandma's care. Why?
Yes.
I know. Doss's eldest, whose name was Melvina, great name, gave birth to Robert Lee Haynes in 1943, and then another baby followed 2 years later, but then died soon afterward. And it said, exhausted from labor and groggy from ether, which is a great thing they used to use, Melvina thought she saw her visiting mother stick a hat pin into the baby's head. When she asked her husband and sister for clarification, they said Doss had told them the baby was dead, and they noticed that she was holding a pin.
Oh my God.
But the doctors didn't. I know, it's the sickest thing ever. And the doctors couldn't give a positive explanation for the death, and the grieving parents basically drifted apart. So she basically caused her daughter's divorce. And Melvina started dating a soldier, which Nanny disapproved of. And while Melvina was visiting her father after a particularly nasty fight with Nanny, Her son Robert died mysteriously under Granny's care on July 7th of 1945. The death was diagnosed as asphyxia from unknown causes, and 2 months later, Doss collected the $500 life insurance she'd taken out on Robert. So I want you guys to keep in mind that she said, and other people said, she didn't do this for the insurance money, but she did actually collect some because, you know, if you're killing your family off, you're going to get insurance money.
Yeah.
Right.
Usually that's the motive. So then we're starting to get into the end of World War II here. And in 1945, Japan surrendered to the Allied powers. And Nanny's husband, Harrelson, at the time, was among the most robust partiers. So after an evening of particularly heavy drinking, he raped Nanny. The next day, she discovered his corn whiskey jar buried in the ground as she tended her rose garden. And basically, the rape was the last straw, so she took the jar and topped it off with rat poison, and he died a painful death that evening, which I'm kind of glad of.
Yeah.
That's the only one that I'm like, yeah. Well, guess what? My first source was the book, and it said, after a night of carousing, Nanny decided she was going to finish him off for good. And I was like, that's a lot different than carousing. Like, it said after a lustful night of carousing with her husband.
What?
That is such a different picture. And there's a reason they're trying to paint this picture of her, which is the thing I'm leaving out right now, but it's ridiculous. Like, not saying what she did was right in any capacity, but I feel like the press needs to make the murder more interesting. Even more interesting.
Yeah.
So, now we're on to the third husband. 1947, she gets a letter from Arlie Lanning, and she moves to North Carolina, and he was also a drinker and a philanderer. But she didn't know this, like when she married them, of course. She married him within 2 days of meeting, so that's probably why she did not know that.
Yeah.
Right. He's dead by 1950. She moves in with her mother-in-law after her house burns down, because she has no choice, so she moves in with Arlie's mom. 2 weeks later, her mother-in-law dies in her sleep.
Oh my god.
Natural causes. It's stated as natural causes. But Nanny moved in with one of her sisters, and guess what? Her sister's dead in a couple days. How is she getting this far? I have no idea.
Yeah, why are people still wanting to be around her? Even if you didn't suspect it, you might be like, well, a lot of people die around you. I don't know if I want to be around you.
Basically, everyone was like, poor Nanny, bad luck follows you wherever you go.
Oh my gosh.
Because people are that stupid. Fourth husband, 1952. Richard L. Morton, retired businessman. You think she's going to get her dream man this time?
God, no.
He's flat broke, in debt, and cheating. Her mother came to move in with her, and then a year later, her mom dies of mysterious stomach pains. Same year, the husband dies. Fifth husband. This is the last one, I promise.
Oh my god.
1953, Sam Doss. She married him because she thought he was safe, but it turns out he was boring AF.
Oh my gosh.
So she tried to kill him with a poison.
Happy with a boring guy?
She tried to kill him with a poison pie, but he was a strong motherfucker. And after 25 days in the hospital, he recovered, and she was like, that's it. The same day, she killed him with a cup of coffee upon returning home. The doctor finally, goddammit, became suspicious, so he ordered an autopsy. Apparently, I had to do some math here, which is how interesting this was to me. There was enough arsenic in Sam's system to kill 20 men, but Wikipedia says 40 horses, so let's break this down. If we go by weight, assuming it takes more arsenic to kill a horse than it does a man, it takes 100 to 300 milligrams of arsenic to kill an average 180-pound man. The median weight of the horse is around 1,500 pounds, depending on what kind of horse you get. So this means I would take 6,333.2 milligrams of arsenic to kill 40 horses, and 3,000 milligrams of arsenic to kill 20 men. It would take a lot more arsenic to kill 40 horses than it would to kill 20 men. So he had at least 3,000 milligrams of arsenic in his system.
That's insane.
Oh my god.
It was more arsenic than coffee.
What kind of rats did these people think she was killing that were selling her all this arsenic?
I have no idea, because actually it never says where she acquired it. Obviously, you could just get it at any drugstore, but there's never any part in this story where it says, like, boy, she did buy a lot of arsenic. Basically, when they figured out she did it, the bodies of Doss's 2 infant children, 4 of her husbands, 2 of her sisters, her mother, and a nephew, they'd all been killed by arsenic poisoning. They were exhumed and tested, and they figured that out. She confessed in such a lighthearted fashion that she was screened for possible insanity, but she passed this test somehow. After all was said and done, Nanny appeared as fresh as a daisy. She laughingly outlined a meal complete with coffee she would like to prepare for the investigators. When asked what she thought they should do with her for poisoning all those people, her answer was, "Why, anything they like. Anything they do is perfectly all right with me."
What?
May 17th, 1955, she pleaded guilty. Life imprisonment. Basically, she avoided the death penalty because she was a woman.
Oh my God.
And she died of leukemia in prison in 1965. So here's the thing I left out because I thought it was kind of weird. Like, what's the motive for all this if it isn't the money? Well, a lot of sources try to peg the reason for the murders on some sort of overly attached girlfriend thing.
Oh my God.
So, like, according to author Manners, Nanny, who had terrible mood swings, dreamed of love and of finding her own Prince Charming. Her only interest was her mother's romantic magazines, and she would sit for hours in her bedroom just looking at the loving couples staring out at her from the pages. As she grew older, her favorite bits were the ads for the Lonely Hearts Clubs. And then basically the book said when she killed a husband, it was because he had proven himself to be a grave disappointment to her idea of manly valor, which she intended, I guess that's a typo, after reading too many romance novels and magazines. And the rest of the people she killed got in the way of her finding her one true love.
Oh my God.
She even said, "That's about it. I was searching for the perfect mate, the real romance of life." But Murderpedia says Nanny Doss had been molested by a string of local men before she reached her middle teens.
That's what I figured.
Recall the first source stating that she always found time for a roll in the hay.
Yeah.
Which is sick.
Yeah.
So,
I really hate the overly attached girlfriend thing.
the thing is, she said it herself, but I'm
I
also
know.
like, I think the media's using it to make it more interesting.
Well, and you could see where, I mean, maybe having the history that she had, she did get those romantic ideas. And so it definitely contributed to it. I could say there could be both be the reason. Could both be that she was molested and so it fucked her up for life, and that she had this kind of screwed up version of romance in her mind, but obviously no matter who she picked wasn't ever going to be good enough. I mean, she kept marrying these losers, and then she marries this last guy, who sounds like he was a decent guy, but he was boring, and she was like, don't want that either.
Well, apparently he was super religious, I forgot to mention this, and wouldn't allow her to have her romance magazines, and, like, never was, like, a penny pincher and never wanted to go out, so she basically had to sit home because he wanted her to be there in bed by 9:30 every night. Which, yeah, that's bad too, I guess, but I feel like it's probably both, and, I mean, because of all these terrible things that happen to you and you grow up with an abusive father, you, like, escape. You want to escape, and you get into these romance stories.
I hate pegging mental illness on stuff like this, but I just want to say, like, the first thing that I was thinking of with this is borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times that, like, the source of that is molestation in childhood, and also, like, this overabsorption in relationships and attachment and all of that.
And thinking...
But I don't think they're usually dangerous.
No.
They're more of a danger to themselves than they are to other people. But with that head injury, that could have...
There's some serious frontal lobe shit going on there.
Yeah.
I think the borderline personality disorder is a valid claim. I mean, we're armchair diagnosing, obviously, but I mean, there's the, also I've read that you can be super idolizing someone one moment, and then the next moment they're just like the worst person on earth, and they're so disappointed.
Yeah. I mean, borderline personality is like, I hate you, don't leave me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Isn't there a book called I Hate You, Don't Leave Me about it?
I think there is, yeah.
Actually, now that I didn't think of this last night, but when I was reading this out again, it reminds me of Annie Wilkes.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, you're right.
It's very Misery without the author.
I just want to say, like, the reason I say I don't like the whole overly attached girlfriend thing is because, to me, it feels like that's what our media and what guys like to peg on women all the time. My dad watches a lot of the court shows that are on TV during the day, and I've watched some of them, and sometimes, well, not sometimes, it's almost every time a ex is suing his girlfriend or she's suing him, it's because he always says, she's still obsessed with me, or she's just so obsessed with me, she won't leave me, she won't let me go, she just still wants to be with me, she's still in love with me. I feel like that is said all the time, and it really drives me nuts. So it almost makes me wonder if the media did kind of peg that on her as well, because everybody always wants to say, oh, she's just crazy, she's just obsessed with men.
Right. I think it's scarier. So the reason I left it out was because without that element, all you have is a woman who married a string of terrible husbands, got hit in the head, made some terrible, terrible, evil choices, and then went to jail. With that, you have a sensationalist sort of story about the kooky grandma who's obsessed with romance novels. I almost think without that element, it's because I caught myself when I read it at first. I was like, oh, look at this batshit crazy chick, and I was like, oh, I'm eating this up, and then I'm going, wait, something's not ringing, like something in my brain isn't ringing right here. So I'm like, let's leave this in, but put it at the end because it may be important, but it's not everything.
Right.
It's not the whole story.
Right.
And then when you hear that, you're waiting for you're filling in the narrative. While as the story's going, you're going, oh, what's the next thing? Is he going to take away her magazines, and is that why she's going to do it? Yeah. So I thought, I don't know.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder if it was kind of added in there, and she could have been suggestible to say something like that along the lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
she could have been, but I also think that it speaks to a pattern. That she kept killing the husbands. And killing the relatives of the husbands.
And her own
relatives. And her own relatives and babies. There's something wrong there.
Oh, yeah. God, yes, there's something wrong. And I think it definitely fits into the narrative. I think it's part of the narrative. I think it's necessary. Yeah. But I just don't think it should be the foremost part of, like, this is the crazy lady whose romance novels made her kill people. I think the problem is a lot deeper than that, and the romance novels are a part of it, but not the whole thing, of course.
Yeah.
It's like a symptom, not the disease.
Yeah.
It's a symptom of whatever disease is. So. Yeah, that would turn out to be sadder than I thought. Because I thought it was kind of weirdly funny when I read most of it, until I found out she was starting to kill the children.
Yeah. What episode was it when we were talking about where it was like a woman that killed someone? And I just remember us discussing, like, you feel like you want to go, yeah, you go, but at the same time, it's like, no, you're killing people. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think we were talking about, it must have been we were talking about Dolores Claiborne.
I haven't even
That was way back in, like, episode 2.
Yeah, it was in the very beginning. We were up in the attic, I know that.
Can you imagine how hot it is up there right now?
Oh my gosh, I don't even want to know.
I feel like we should have,
I've never heard of either of these, so this is exciting.
I feel like we should have black party hats on.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, this is
so exciting.
But yeah, no, these are good, because I've never heard of either of these people, so that makes it more fun.
Yeah, yes. I don't like hearing the same stories over and over again.
Right.
Yeah. So, Rachel, what you got for us?
Okay, so mine is, I guess, a little bit more famous. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, but it's a little bit more famous for a couple of reasons. So mine are actually two girls that killed together. Their names were Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume. Pauline was 16 and Juliet was 15.
Is this okay, I'm not going to guess, but I think I know who it is.
Yeah. So they committed their murder in Christchurch, New Zealand. And this murder at the time was world famous. It's still super famous in New Zealand. But at the time, it was it's these two teenage girls. It's this huge sensation. So we'll start with some backstory. So Juliet was born in London. And then in August of 1953, she moves to New Zealand with her parents. Her dad is a professor, and he gets a job at the college in Christchurch. So she starts attending Christchurch Girls' High School, where she meets Pauline. They bond over the fact that they were both extremely ill as children. Juliet had TB, and Pauline had something called, let me see if I can pronounce it, osteomyelitis, which is like a deep bone infection. both obviously horrible conditions to have, both incredibly painful. So within not very long of meeting each other, they basically become obsessed with each other. I know we've talked about before how intense teenage girl friendships can be. This is that turned up to 11. They start building this fantasy world. They give each other names from their fantasy world. They start writing novels that I believe by the time they commit the murder, they have written 7 novels, a few plays, an opera. They begin to only speak to each other in character. Juliet's mother says later that it became almost impossible to speak to Juliet and not one of Juliet's characters. They also start to believe that they can access this place called the Fourth World. The Fourth World, it's almost like heaven. They say, so Pauline helpfully kept a diary throughout this entire thing. So she says, today Juliet and I found the key to the Fourth World. We realize now that we've had it in our possession for about 6 months, but we only realized it on the day of the death of Christ. We saw a gateway through the clouds. We sat on the edge of the path and looked down the hill out over the bay. The island looked beautiful. The sea was blue. Everything was full of peace and bliss. We then realized we had the key. We now realize that we are not genies as we had thought. We have an extra part of our brain which can appreciate the Fourth World. Only about 10 people have it. When we die, we will go to the Fourth World, but meanwhile, on 2 days every year, we may use the key and look into that beautiful world which we have been lucky enough to be allowed to know of, on this day of finding the key to the way through the clouds. So, living in this fantasy world were saints. They called them saints. They're idealized versions of movie stars that they liked at the time, like James Mason, Orson Welles, just basically any movie star they found was handsome. And they believed that because of their friendship, they had almost achieved nirvana. They'd achieved this enlightenment by being with each other. So at this point, they've been friends for about 6 or 7 months. This takes place in the 50s. I don't know if I mentioned that, but their parents start to fear, of course, that they're lesbians. Of course, back then, being a lesbian was considered a mental illness. Being gay in general, not just lesbian, but any kind of homosexuality was considered a mental illness. In June of 1954, so they've been friends for about 10 months. So all of this takes place over 10 months. Juliet's parents decide that they're going to get a divorce. They decide that they want Juliet to move to South Africa to live with some of her relatives, basically for 2 reasons. One, because it gets her away from Pauline, and the parents do not want them involved with each other anymore. And 2, so when she had TB, she didn't live with her parents. It was common back then, when you had TB, they would send you to a tropical climate. So she grew up, she spent a lot of time in the Bahamas, she spent a lot of time in South Africa, the Caribbean, kind of all over, but apart from her parents. So you sort of get this sense that they're not the world's greatest parents, and that they kind of don't want to deal with her, so it's easier if they just send her away. So of course the girls are just horrified and heartbroken at being separated. They feel like they cannot live without each other. So they come up with this plan that they're going to go to America, they're going to go to Hollywood, and they're going to sell their novels and become rich and famous. Well, the only thing holding them back is that Pauline is only 16, and she does not have a passport. And because she's underage, she has to get her parents' permission to get a passport. So she goes to her mother, and her mom is like, hell no, you're crazy, I don't want you to be around this girl as it is. Why would I get you a passport? So the girls decide that the only way for her to get a passport is to kill Pauline's mother. I did read this book. It's called, I actually read it a long time ago, but it's called So Brilliantly Clever by Peter Graham. And it seems like the dad was kind of a pushover, so I guess maybe they thought that it would be easy to influence him. Once he would be a single father with 3 kids, it would be well, of course he'd want one of the kids to move out, because then it would be less expenses or whatever. So They come up with this plan. Again, Pauline has helpfully documented all of this in her diary. Their plan, and I assume this is the exact details of how it. I mean, people know the general details, but I assume the exact details are the way that she planned it in the diary. On June 22nd, 1954, the mother, whose name is Honora, and the two girls go to Victoria Park, which is this nature park in Christchurch. They stop in a tea room. They eat the little tea sandwiches and scones and drink tea, have a nice day, and then they go for a hike. And one of the girls distracts the mother while the other one kind of tosses something shiny like a gemstone, something like that, onto the path ahead. And then they say, "Oh, what's that?" And as the mother drops down to pick it up, they beat her to death with a brick wrapped in a nylon stocking. This all takes 30 minutes. So they run back to the tea room, covered in blood, screaming and crying that Honora has fallen and hit her head, and, they think she might be dead. So the owner of the tea room is this man. So he goes down, it's a man and his wife. So he goes down and finds the body. The wife calls the police. So the police get there, and of course, this story is ridiculous. I mean, they are drenched in blood. They've just beaten somebody to death. Like, if you fall and hit your head, you're not spraying blood everywhere.
That's what I was thinking. Like, if they beat her with a brick, how's she gonna look like she fell?
So they never really get any testimony from the girls, but my guess is that they were surprised that they thought she was gonna die with one hit over the head.
Geez, I guess it's a good thing that they didn't write murder mysteries.
So the police find the brick, like 10 feet away or something ridiculous like that.
God.
They didn't even try.
No. Well, they're teenagers. They are delusional teenagers. And so they go to Pauline's house and search the house, and of course then they find her diaries, which has everything in it. It has the entire plan for the murder. I mean, she's writing about the murder, like, on the night before they're going to commit it, and she's talking about how it feels like the night before Christmas.
Oh my gosh.
So she is arrested that night, and then Juliet is arrested the next day. They do take it to trial. Both girls plead that they were insane at the time of the killing. So the trial begins August 23rd, and of course they're both convicted on August 28th. So they're too young for the death penalty, which New Zealand had at the time. And so they're both sentenced to prison sentences. They both end up serving 5 years, and they are released at separate times, like a couple of months apart. And allegedly, I don't know if this is true, I've seen it in a couple of accounts, but I, first of all, have no idea how they would enforce this. And second of all, I can't seem to find anything from, like, a sentencing hearing where they stipulate this, but allegedly they were released on the condition that they never speak to each other again. But again, I don't know how you would enforce it, so that seems a little absurd.
Yeah.
So the girls basically vanish after this. No one knows what has happened to these girls. Then in 1994, a movie comes out, which, if you held a gun to my head, I would probably tell you was my favorite movie, called Heavenly Creatures. It's directed by Peter Jackson, who, of course, did Lord of the Rings. It's the first film roles for Melanie Lynskey, who plays Pauline, and Kate Winslet, who plays Juliet. Peter Jackson, for people who don't know, is from New Zealand. So, of course, he knew about this crime. This movie really kind of brought this crime back to the public interest. It got nominated for an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. It's a great movie. So, of course, then people start the hunt to find Pauline and Juliet. Juliet ends up outing herself. So, Nikki, it's so funny that you brought up it's a good thing they didn't write murder mysteries. Have you ever heard of Anne Perry?
Yes.
That's her.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Oh my god.
So Juliet moves to the U.S. and ends up converting to Mormonism because, like, why not? And then she moves back to England and begins writing under the pen name Anne Perry.
You are kidding me, dude.
Kidding.
No way.
Nobody knew. And so this movie came out. So Anne Perry has written over 80 novels. Her first book was published in 1978. So Perry was her stepfather's name. So after the murder, her parents still end up getting divorced, of course, and her mother remarries a guy with the last name Perry. I don't know where she got Anne from, but she takes Perry from her stepfather.
Did you read the small Wikipedia description that you get when you Google that name?
No.
It's kind of funny. Anne Perry is an English author of historical detective fiction, best known for her Thomas Pitt and William Monk series. At the age of 15, she was convicted of participating in the murder of her friend's mother in 1954. It's just right there in Wikipedia.
But nobody knew. So this is the thing. So it had been 40 years since the murder, and no one knew what happened to her. So after Heavenly Creatures comes out, Juliet ends up outing herself as Anne Perry. The reason she does so is because in the movie, they do have a sexual relationship. Now, it is hinted at in Pauline's diaries. I don't think it's an invalid choice for the movie to go there. It's not sensationalized. It's not like, oh, look at this, like, titillating thing that's happening. It's just a natural extension of their feelings and kind of intense bond with each other, right? But she basically comes out. She says they were never lesbians. She blames the whole thing on Pauline. She says, I only went along with it because I was afraid she was going to commit suicide if I didn't do it. She claims she has no memory of the killing. All this really convenient stuff. She says she's never talked to Pauline since. So later that year, somebody finds Pauline. Of course, she's also changed her name. She's moved to Scotland in 1965. She lives in a small village and she runs a writing school for children. She is an extremely devout Catholic. Extremely devout. So she has never given an interview, but I did find one with her sister. And her sister basically just says, what Anne Perry said is shit. They knew what they were doing. The sister still talks to her. She's like, they knew what they were doing, but they were so deluded. They knew they were killing her, but it's almost like they didn't understand that, like, death is final. They really believed that what they were doing was right. And so reporters go to this village to try and interview this lady, and the whole village basically comes out and, like, protects her from the reporters. And they're like, she's been a good citizen, she doesn't bother anyone, she has never hurt anybody since, she served her time, leave her alone. Yeah, those are my murders. I think they suffered from, I think you call it like a shared delusion.
A folie à deux? Folie à deux? My French is horrible, I'm sorry.
That's okay. But yes, where one of them started to become delusional, who knows which one, and they were so intensely intertwined and spent time exclusively with each other, they had no other friends, that the other one started to believe it. I mean, you hear that phrase like, oh, if you spend enough time with crazy, you start going crazy. And it's the same thing. I mean, they spent enough time with each other that they basically drove each other insane.
You know what's funny? When you said, what were their ages when they did it? Do you remember?
16 and 15.
Okay, so when you said that, I thought you were going to do the Slender Man murders.
No, but actually, when I watched the Slender Man documentary, it reminded me of this, because they also had a shared delusion.
And that's so weird, then as you started going on, I've never heard of this one, I thought this is like the Slender Man murders, almost.
No.
Except in that case, one of them clearly was the mastermind of it, and the other one was a bit scared.
That one, I think, wasn't one of them diagnosed with schizophrenia.
I'm not sure, but
I think that's what the documentary said. One of them diagnosed with schizophrenia, and the other one had no friends. And so they just kind of went along with it because they didn't want to lose their friend.
Mm-hmm. And then they went on a hike, and they tried to kill their friend. It was like the same thing, except with a different fantasy and different person they were killing.
So I highly recommend Heavenly Creatures if people haven't seen it. It's amazing. It's beautifully done. I think it does as well as it can do with the subject material without sensationalizing it. And it has Kate Winslet, who I love. So just to say my sources, so I mentioned the book that I had actually read a long time ago. And then the Library of Christchurch has a bunch of their newspaper articles digitized, which is great. So that's where I got a lot of the stuff about the trial. I mean, the trial, like I said, was a huge sensation. They testified, I think, that the girls were homosexual. that they were obsessed with each other. The reason they were found culpable, though, is because they knew that killing the mother was wrong. I mean, in order to be found not guilty by reason of insanity, you have to be so insane that you don't understand that what you're doing is wrong. They knew it was wrong. They just didn't give a shit because she was in their way of being together, basically. So if you ever read the Aunt Perry book, which I have, you will know.
Does it hold up, or is it just ridiculous?
Her books?
Yeah, like, obviously they didn't know in their routines not to hide a brick or,
No. I mean, it holds up. One thing that I've noticed with her books is she never focuses on the murder. It's never described in, like, graphic detail or anything. And then I read somewhere, I've only read a couple of her books, but this was a long time ago, so I have no idea what article this was, but I read an article about her books and how her prison scenes are really realistic. And so a lot of people think that maybe she was drawing on her own experience in prison.
Probably. I would think so. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? I know.
I can't fucking believe that. I still can't believe. I'm like, no way.
So she ended up living their dream of becoming an author. So what do you know? And neither of them ever married or had kids. Anne Perry lived with her mother until her mother died. But they actually both live in Scotland. So they're in the same country.
They probably talk to each other. I mean, it's not a coincidence that you moved from New Zealand to Scotland.
I really have no idea. So the sister claims that Pauline is completely cut off from the outside world. She doesn't even own a radio. She doesn't watch TV. She doesn't read the news. She just runs her little writing school and goes to, like, the library in town and stuff. But who knows if they've contacted each other? I can't imagine that they haven't. But I also can't imagine that they have, based on the fact that Aunt Perry tried to blame the whole thing on Pauline.
Alright,
Which is kind of a bullshit move. I mean, come on, girl. Like,
that might kind of throw a wrench in the friendship a little bit.
Right. Like, you did it. You were a willing participant. You were just as crazy as she was. So if you look online, you can actually find a lot of pictures of them, which is I always want to know what people look like in real life. There's definitely a class aspect to it. Pauline's family was solidly middle class to lower middle class. They ran a boarding house out of their home, whereas Juliet's family was extremely wealthy. And Juliet is beautiful, and Pauline is kind of a plain Jane.
Yeah, it's Pauline.
Pauline has kind of dark brown hair, and Juliet's more like light brown blonde hair.
Is one of them extremely... Okay, so who's the real tall one?
That's Juliet.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
And Pauline's the one that's more, like, hunched over.
I see.
Almost reminds me of Ginger Snaps.
A little bit, yeah. And I think a big part of the obsession was this idea that Juliet was living this fabulous life, and here was Pauline's chance to kind of also live... I mean, they had all these fantasies of Juliet's parents, like, adopting Pauline and them being, like, one big family. Which, like, was never gonna happen. I mean, none of these were based in reality. They just became so intertwined, I guess, with each other and obsessed with each other that they completely lost touch. Which is scary. But, yeah, so there you go. So I did end up doing a child who killed their parent. What do you know?
For some reason, I feel, like, really bummed right now. I don't know.
It was not great. I mean, the poor mother...
Man,
so she wouldn't let her have a passport to South Africa or whatever.
So did you pick a topic for next week, Rachel?
I was thinking we could do, like, Battle of Movie Monsters.
Okay.
I love monster movies.
Yeah. With this one, I think it should be driver picks the music, shotgun shuts his cake hole. Because, like,
that's a Supernatural quote, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't even like Supernatural, but I'm quite fond of it.
I was a little confused.
Yeah, I like it.
Also, do you want to talk about... I can't even remember her name. You mentioned her name. But
we were going to talk about Michelle...
Is it Carter?
Carter.
Okay.
Yeah, who texted her boyfriend to get back in the car when he was trying to commit suicide.
I don't know if there's much to talk about there.
I was just going to say, like, personally, it's been really, like, getting on my nerves because there's a lot of conflicting opinions about this, and for some reason... Charles Manson keeps getting brought up. I understand why, because he technically didn't actually kill somebody, but he convinced people to do it. But I just want to say that it's not a fitting scenario, and you can't compare the two, because people are using him to say, like, and we mentioned this when we did the Charlie Manson episode, there are people who say, like, he didn't do it, so he shouldn't be convicted. Well, people are using that argument for her. She didn't do it, so she shouldn't be convicted. You know, and then people are also using him to say, like, he didn't do it, but he got convicted. You know, it's like, I just want him out of the equation, first of all, because it's pointless. It's a completely different scenario, and I think that more focus should be put on the fact that this boy killed himself. For me, suicide is such a big deal because it's the whole reason that I'm going to school for what I'm going for and why I want to do what I want to do. I spent a lot of my time in high school trying to help friends out of that state of mind. And so when I saw this case, it just drove me up a wall, and I couldn't even believe it. To have somebody that is so close to you and somebody that trusts you, and for you to convince them to take that step instead of convincing them to step back, I think it's one of the most evil things that you can do to somebody.
Yeah, it is. I definitely agree. I mean, I agreed that it was manslaughter and not murder, because he did kill himself.
Yeah.
He did a lot of the research. He went out and bought the water pump or whatever it was that he used, and the generator. The big argument that I've seen is that it was free speech. That is protected speech.
But it's not. Because free speech doesn't include... It's a hate crime if you convince violence, isn't it? If you are inciting any sort of violence.
I always had a history teacher who told me that you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. You can't, like...
Yeah.
But their argument about that is that if you yell fire in a crowded movie theater, that's a lie. Obviously, if there's a fire, nobody's going to convict you if a bunch of people start panicking and dying. But if you just yell fire and there's no fire, that's a lie. You are, like you said, inciting those people to violence. I think the free speech argument is he was going to kill himself whether she was on the phone with him or not. And the fact that she told him to get back in, I'm not saying I agree with that, but I think that's the argument. I think it seems to me that she was convicted on the basis that if someone is actively harming someone, I assume including themselves, legally you are obligated to do something. If Nikki were to shoot you right now, and I didn't call the police, I could be convicted of accessory after the fact. Or if I was with her and she killed you, I could be convicted of murder if I didn't do anything and if I didn't tell anyone, even though I didn't pull the trigger.
Rachel would just be like, oh, I guess the podcast's over now.
Damn it.
Like, hey, guys.
I'm taking stress right now.
Well, I guess we're 2 instead of 3.
So I think that was kind of the basis of their argument, was that he was technically committing a felony by committing suicide, and she didn't do anything to stop it. And by not trying to stop it, like the judge said, I mean, she had a million options. She could have called 911. She could have called his parents. She could have called anybody, and she didn't.
Did you read the whole conversation?
I did.
Yeah.
And read the text she had with her friends afterwards.
Oh, I didn't read that.
So BuzzFeed actually uncovered this. I don't know if the prosecutors used it in the trial, but BuzzFeed readers, good for them, figured out during the trial that a lot of the texts she was sending to her friends were direct quotes from this show called Glee. So I don't know if you guys watched Glee.
I never noticed that.
There was this actor, the lead actor on Glee, Corey Monteith, died of a heroin overdose while the show was still on the air. He was dating Leah Michele, who was the lead actress on the show, and their characters were dating on the show. And so they do an episode, obviously, where he has passed away, and a lot of the things she was texting her friends were direct quotes that Leah Michele's character says in that episode of Glee.
So it was obviously an act. That's my first thought. I didn't hear about that.
I think that was what the prosecution said, is that she wanted the attention of being the grieving girlfriend.
Yeah. To me, like, when I was reading the text messages, it didn't feel to me like if he were left to his own devices, he would have killed himself, because
he kept backing out.
Right. He kept saying, like, I remember, like, mentioning, like, his parents and, like, how are they going to feel, and she kept saying things like, they're going to feel so much better when you kill yourself. Imagine, like, they're not going to have to deal with your problems, you know, and what about your friends, you know, and she was always taking him back to it, and he just seemed like he was constantly backing out.
And, like, avoiding it.
Right.
And she keeps going to, are you going to do it?
Yeah.
When are you going to do it? Can you tell me, like,
You said you were
going to
do it last night. Yeah, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And it's just over and over and over. Not just, like, once.
Yeah.
I think that he had attempted suicide twice before.
Oh, yeah.
One time he tried to drown himself, but ended up obviously not being able to go through. That would be a horrible way to die.
It's hard.
And then I can't remember what the second way was, but there was a second time where he tried to commit suicide, but ends up backing out himself. And so the judge was kind of like, it doesn't matter if you had told him not to commit suicide and he had gotten out of the truck and then the next day he had gone and done it anyway. That doesn't matter. The point is that in that moment you had a responsibility to tell him to, or not even necessarily to tell him to stop, but to get help.
Yeah.
You knew where he was.
Right.
I mean, I just can't even.
I know.
I can't imagine.
Well, I also just feel like with a freedom of speech argument, aren't you inciting violence by trying to push someone verbally to kill themselves?
Well, I think that's how they were getting around the freedom of speech argument.
Yeah.
Is that they were saying that it's not protected speech because it was inciting violence.
Right.
But I know that a lot of the free speech people would say that, again, he bought the water pump, he hooked it up himself, he had researched what was going to happen to him after he turned it on, that fall for his own death.
I feel like people don't really understand freedom of speech because I've gotten into very heated fights with people about freedom of speech. While I was in a criminal justice class and being told by my professor I was right, I was getting called names and really disgusting things because I was telling people they were misunderstanding. And that there are certain things that are not protected when it comes to freedom of speech. But people don't want to hear that. People just want to hear exactly that. Freedom of speech. Apparently you're allowed to say whatever you want to say, but it's not the case. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I think that, well, so this was the ACLU. The ACLU wrote a brief in support of her and sent it to the judge.
Jesus.
Because their argument is that this violates her freedom of speech because it is the government going after her for what she's saying. It's not people online going after her. She didn't get fired from her job for freedom of speech. It's the government is trying to convict her. Their argument was you could think that what she said was disgusting, which obviously it was, but that doesn't make it a crime.
But there's a difference between her saying, like, yeah, I think you should kill yourself, and her pushing him to do it.
Which is what the judge said, which is what the judge agreed with, is that there was a difference.
Okay.
I think it just comes down to how much you believe it was his own personal responsibility. I mean, I think their argument was he was going to kill himself anyway, so what she said doesn't matter. The judge rejected that argument, though, so...
Yeah.
That's good.
You know,
I think manslaughter, I agree with that conviction.
It's definitely not murder. I mean, he killed himself.
Yeah, he did. He did do it all.
She didn't turn that water pump on.
No.
Right.
No.
This is totally off topic, but I'm tired. So this week I don't have a recommendation. I have an unrecommendation. So we watched The Mummy. I'm glad it was free. I'll put it that way. So I was not expecting it to be like the Brendan Fraser movies, and I don't have a problem with that. I like those movies. They're fine on their own. But when Universal announced that they were going back to like their Universal Monsters brand, I thought it was gonna stupidly, clearly, thought it was gonna be like the original Universal Monster movies, which were made for like $5. I would exclude Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein from this because I think those are legitimately excellent movies. I mean, Bride of Frankenstein, I would say, even crosses into like art territory. But the rest of them were made for no money. They're kind of cheesy, but they're a lot of fun. And they take themselves semi-seriously, but not super seriously. And this movie was just like a generic, CGI-filled action movie. It was so bad. There was nothing enjoyable about it. It just does not give me any confidence for the rest of their franchise or whatever they're trying to build going forward. Watch the original Universal Monster movies if you haven't seen them.
I also have an unrecommendation that I just saw today. can't lie, I did not make it all the way through it because it was 2 hours and 15 minutes long, and it was an anthology movie called Rampo Noir.
No! I love that movie!
It's like a snuff film.
I love it!
Here are my reasons. It was just porn. like torture porn.
Oh, God.
Is basically what I thought this whole movie was. I don't even want to describe the things I saw, basically. And I personally just couldn't sit through it.
I love that movie. Oh my god.
I think it, like, wanted to be super art housey, but it was just torture porn.
They're based on,
novel, right?
Yeah. Well, short stories by this kind of legendary Japanese horror writer.
Like, I just couldn't describe to you what I saw today.
Oh my god.
Oh, jeez.
The story about the mirrors was interesting.
I'm not saying they're not gross, but I thought it went past, like, hostile levels of torture porn to the point where it was legitimately interesting and a good movie. I'm pretty sure it's on my list of my favorite horror movies of all time.
God, oh no.
I love it. I think it's great, but it's not for everybody. If you don't like super gross...
It's kind of making me feel like I need to check it out, because I really like...
you can have it. I have it right here. You can have it.
While we're doing unrecommendations, I have one then. We watched this really shitty movie called Voodoo, and it supposedly, I don't know if it has come out yet, or if it is, like, going to come out, but it said 2017 on it, and it was the weirdest fucking thing. And it felt like it never ended. It felt like it went on all night, but I think it was only an hour and a half long. And that's how you know a movie is bad, is when you're just sitting there like, when is this going to end? I think after an hour, I was like, this has to be almost done. And we still had another half hour.
That's what I was doing with the movie I was watching earlier. And I was like I was watching this woman like slice this guy's nipples, and I was like, I really gotta like make that salad I was gonna make, and the laundry and stuff, and that's really like a good sign.
The whole last half hour of the movie is like their attempt at depicting hell, and they failed miserably. It's like you can't even really tell what's going on, but it's just like all of these different torture scenes, and then at the end she gets raped by Satan. And it's like it's exactly like how you picture Satan, like with the horns. And hell was just like a bunch of corridors.
And this seems to have nothing to do with actual voodoo.
Oh, it's a found footage film. I forgot to mention that. It's found footage, and the whole time they're going through hell, a demon is carrying the fucking camera behind her.
That's convenient.
Every time the word voodoo is involved in a film, I'm like, well, this is going to be accurate. Like, can this just be one of the things we can stop being scared of? Because it's not working anymore.
Yeah.
Like, wait for the racism.
Yeah.
Every time you mention voodoo, I'm like, oh god, we're going to have bones through people's noses. It's going to happen.
I don't know if there's a way to save the ending of this podcast, honestly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good female murderers out there. Don't let the men have all the glory.
Oh my god.
We could go all John Oliver on it and go #feminism.
I almost did Eileen Wuornos, because even though that's the first thing everyone thinks of, as Rachel was saying, when I said we're doing female murder, she's like, everyone's gonna pick Eileen Wuornos.
She's the one female serial killer that everybody knows.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I almost did that because there's a really interesting angle to the story where the press really used her. They just wrung every little bit of publicity out of her that was possible, and there's some very good documentaries on it. They're both on Netflix. I can't think of, one's Eileen, and then I can't remember what the other title is, but...
And I also recommend Monster, the movie about her with Charlize Theron.
I need to see that.
So good. It actually makes you feel, I'm not going to say sympathy, because, like, what she did is so ridiculously over the top, but you can see where maybe the first murder victim, why she did it, but after that, it's kind of like, girl, you like killing these men.
I have a shirt with Eileen Wuornos on it that says I'm with her. And it's, like, not for the fact that she killed all those people, because that was totally wrong. But after I saw those documentaries, I'm with her as far as, like, her being right about being exploited, about like exploited by the media and like used, and how she was the biggest monster anybody could have ever thought of because she was a woman who killed people. Men who kill people, yeah, sure, we have plenty of them, and they're all monsters. But Eileen Wuornos, according to this documentary, was thought of as just the biggest monster ever.
Yeah.
See, I don't know. I think I've seen that documentary, and I don't know if I really believed that.
Oh, really?
To me, when people think of monstrous serial killers, Eileen Wuornos is kind of far down the list. I mean, you get Ted Bundy, you get Gacy, you get Dahmer.
Manson.
Yeah, I mean, I think you think of men, which is why Eileen is the only female that people know. Because they're so rare, and I think that's where a lot of the media fascination came from. Is before that, who could think of an American female serial killer? I can't.
No. I'm sure there's tons, because we just found 3 that, well, not American. Wait, mine was American.
Mine wasn't.
Mine was Rachel's.
No. One American.
Serial killer, Nikki's is the only, well, both of your guys' would have been a serial killer, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what they would classify yours as, Nikki, because she only killed her family.
It doesn't matter. I think the serial killer definition is 3 or more people over a space of time. It doesn't matter if they're your family. Well, sometimes they call some people family annihilators.
And that's kind of what I wonder, because she wasn't going, it wasn't like Miranda's where she was killing random people. I mean, people she didn't really know.
Right. That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I mean, she could, some people, the family annihilators are usually men who, like John List, who's another fucked up one.
Yeah.
Who, they feel they're failing, so their excuse is to, I'm gonna save my family from my failure.
Mm-hmm.
Or men who, which is unfortunately somewhat common, men who are going through a bitter custody battle, and they think, oh, if I know how I'm gonna hurt you the most, I'm gonna kill the kids. To get back, it's not about the kids, it's about getting back at the ex-wife.
Right.
It just happened. I just saw something in People magazine about it. This guy killed his kids and then hung himself. It was all to get back at the ex-wife because they were going through this really horrible custody battle.
That's so fucked up.
I could be wrong. I think a lot of the family, it's one way or the other, and they're completely opposite. It's either a lot of the family annihilators think they're saving their family but won't kill themselves, they really think a lot of themselves, or they always kill their family and then kill themselves, but John List is an exception. And I can't remember, so if somebody finds that, look it up, please. I would love to hear what the case is. Yeah, God, that's a lot to think about, or try not to think about. We do have to talk about next week.
Sure. So next week we're going to be doing another one of our battle episodes. Rachel's going to be the judge, so Nikki and I are going to fight it out this time. It's going to be along the lines of monster movies. That's going to be a lot of fun. I've been wanting us to do a monster movie episode, so I'm super excited.
I love monster movies, guys. I'm so excited. Let me know ASAP what you're picking in case I haven't seen it.
I kind of have an idea of what I want to do, but I'm not 100% sure yet. But this is going to be the first time that we are including our listeners in the episode. So what we really want is for you guys to send in what you think is the best monster movie. And send us a good explanation. Like, don't just send us the title and everything. Send us a good explanation why it's the best monster movie or why you have the best monster. And we're going to pick from all of the listeners that send it in. You can send it to our email, Facebook, Twitter, anything like that. And we're going to pick the best one on the episode. And that person is going to get a t-shirt, a newly designed t-shirt that we are not currently selling.
And shirts, as we said last week, are very cool. I was so impressed.
I'm pretty, I'm not somebody who's likes to say all those good things about themselves, but I'm kind of proud.
Yeah, Miranda designed it, so.
Yeah.
I was like, Nikki, I'm like, you sent the picture, and I'm like, okay, I didn't know she could do this. I'm like, what the hell? Like, this is amazing.
Well, that's what Nikki said. Nikki didn't know that I drew either.
Anyway, here's this thing I drew together, and I'm like, okay, well, that's cool.
I told Nikki it was just as much of a shock to me because I only do realism. Like, I'm pretty much only experienced in, portraiture. And so, out of nowhere, I just drew this, and I was like, okay, I didn't know I could do that, but there it is. They're just black with the new white logo on them, completely different than what we have online. So we'll be posting pictures about it and everything like that. Make sure you get, sending us messages and everything. We're super excited to see what you guys pick.
Yeah, I think we've talked long enough.
It's going to be a long episode.
By the way, thank you to everyone who has reviewed us on iTunes and started liking our Facebook page and stuff. It's really nice to see that.
Yeah.
It's very exciting to get those notifications.
Oh my gosh. We're over 100 likes now on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yay! It's happening.
I think we got about 15 likes in the past few days. So
Yeah.
It's really nice to see that people are actually listening to. So
Yeah, it's really exciting. So thanks everybody for all the love.
yeah, I guess we'll end it on that note because I've got to be honest, I'm starving. I really just need to eat something.
I know.